Fela Anikulapo Kuti, born on the 15th of October 1938, was no ordinary man. He was not just a musician, a saxophonist, or in the musical band and the owner of the Kalakuta house. It was deeper than that.
1, 2, 3.
trendybeats.com.
He was a human rights activist, and he made sure that his voice was more the things he had organized in the past, more than the quality of education that he has gotten from 2 universities, one in the US and one in London. Of course, he studied classical music in London in the 1950s, and then he went back to study jazz in the US. It has been 28 years of his passing, and if there's anything that we have understood, it is the fact that Fela Anikulapo Kuti was no ordinary musician. He was the voice of the whole nation. He was not just about the Yoruba people, his people. He was about the whole Nigeria. He was about the whole of Africa. Why, you might ask? Well, because his mother is the one and only Fumilayo Ransom Kuti, the first woman to own a car in Nigeria, the first woman to drive a car in Nigeria. And she made it easy for them to understand that, first of all, we are Africans before anything else. It's not just about your skin color, it is about your authority in your voice. Who are you when nobody's watching? Fela's journey obviously began in the 1950s because he had found his sound in not just jazz and his exposure to highlife, but from studying in school, classical music and everything, and the Black Power movement that he had also done in the United States. But upon returning to Nigeria in the 1960s, he had forged a new musical identity, which was infusing his African sound, his rawness, everything about him, into what we have today called Afrobeats. Yes, you heard that right. He is the legendary creator of Afrobeats. He actually had a way of fusing the rhythm of funk, jazz, classical music, and blues. If you hear, there's some things that he would put in his music that would make you feel alive, and that was when Afrobeat was born. Throughout his whole musical career, he found out that the government in the 1970s, after his show with some few international friends abroad, Australia and other places that he had visited, he decided to speak up and speak out. And not just speak out, but he was ready to die on the matter. And that was what he did. After the 1970 entertainment show, he went ahead to speak on the issues in songs like Zombie, Sorrow, Tears and Blood, and Coffin for Head of State. He challenged the military government of IBB, Obasanjo. He did this because he knew that the corruption in the country called Nigeria was overwhelming. After the war that had happened, 1970, when it ended, he knew that if he didn't speak out, then according to him, the thievery will continue. But he was, I think, to me, he was a phenomenal person. He was this kind of person that when he found his voice, he knew he needed to use it. He wasn't scared. He wasn't scared of consequences. I myself would have been scared because, what if they do something? What if? But I don't think he even thought about that, because in some few videos that I have captured, he would speak on telling us the importance of music in a society like Nigeria.
Music is a spiritual thing. You don't play with music. If you play with music, you will die young. See, because when the higher forces give you a gift of music, musicianship, it must be well used for the good of humanity.
So everything that we see today had already started in 1970. That's what he was trying to make us understand. I have found out that, when he was put in prison, the Kalakuta prison in 1977, and after his mom passed, she was brutally thrown down from the staircase. Even there's certain things that he didn't want to talk about, but I know that if I could look into his eyes, I could see the pain and the sorrow and the awareness of what his mother had taught him, had shown him, because he had gone into meetings with Kwame Nkrumah and his mom's friends who were political leaders who decided that Pan-Africanism was something that would bring Africa as a village. But of course, you know that the higher powers will not let that be. And so, looking at the brutal state of oppression, he had brought out, certain songs and albums like International Thief. This was a very huge record back then and still is. In 1980, he released it, and Fela actually triggered a lot of political elites because they were scared that if he had continued, he would expose all their plans for the nearest future. And he did expose them, and people knew, but I feel like he lacked some backing from other people. There were people that loved Fela and that appreciated him and that followed him wherever he went, but he lacked some kind of power. There's this power he lacked, which I felt was more of support from good political leaders. Now, we're not talking about the ones that were looting and all of that. We're talking about the ones that were starting their careers in politics and wanted to speak out for the human rights and speak out for the people in their communities, in their local government areas. Imagine if you had like at least 10 supports of those good people. Because even till today, we have good politicians. We still have people who want to do the right thing, but their voices are being held back, like Aisha. She's just one woman. How do you expect her? Senator Natasha is one woman. How do you expect people like this to do everything? They need backing. And that was what Fela also lacked in the 70s and 80s, down to the passing of him in 1997. I watched his burial. The man was something else. He had inspired people of today's music, like Wizkid, obviously. He has inspired Burna Boy. He has inspired a lot of artists like even Nice. He told Africans that they were allowed to be themselves and they didn't need to hide anything. Their sound, their food, their music, their culture, they should put everything together. Bobo Tibo. So let's look a little at the chance he gave a artist who we call Lemi Garioku. Lemi was a very young man, obviously, and he had met Fela in 1974. So Fela had heard about his artistry and said, okay, let's go and look at what you've done. And I think the young man didn't even know, young Lemmy did not know that he was going to design all of the 26 albums of Fela. But that one showcase put Fela on his good side and he put himself on Fela's good side. So he was the one designing all of his album covers till the day he passed. And in his documentary, you would see Lemmy speaking about how Fela was so creative with telling him the ideas he had and making it clear. So all Lemmy needed to do was ask, so how do you want this album to look like? And Fela would just tell you, oh, I want Beast of No Nation to look like this, where all those politicians at his back are doing things and he's in front singing to them and exposing them. So these are the covers of songs that he had designed album after album and even track after track. So you can imagine he was really working, being an artist, drawing covers, painting it to suit the color, the canvas and everything. So I'm very, very excited for Lemmy. He's still alive, still kicking, very much happy with everything that Fela had made him, do his work. If you want to know more, click on the link. You would see more of Lemmy Garioku's work. It really made other musicians step up with their artistry in album covers. Yes, he inspired a lot of singers, a lot of musicians to step up with all their works. Even Onyeka Onwenu, the legendary Onyeka Onwenu, God bless her soul, she said that Fela would always, try to talk to her and tell her that she's doing the right thing by being herself, no forming anything in her music, no trying to be anybody else, that she should keep it going. And she was so excited because it was good to see somebody say, oh, you're good at what you do and you have to keep going. Looking back at everything that Fela had accomplished, apart from the schoolwork and everything, he has gone on to put on a blueprint. Till today, we still remember him. His legacy was not just about the songs. It was about the message. It was about the fight for justice. It was about turning rhythm into resistance against bad governance. And he did it so well that he had gone to prison about 3 or 4 times. And of course, in his final days in the 90s, he remained defiant of everything that the doctors had told him. Remember, his younger brother was a doctor, and he had told him, you need to rest, you need to treat yourself, you need to be okay. Fela would not listen. He would still go and sing. And I think for Fela, it was more than strength and happiness. It was him trying to fight for people who couldn't fight, people who were voiceless. So today, Afrobeat, because of Fela's reimagined sound from blues, remember, as we said it earlier, the classical music that he has studied in London and the US, they made him reimagine the sound, and he had termed it Afrobeat. So everything about him was African, down to his clothing. Remember, he used to wear these African prints. He made it very specific, down to his 27 dancers. Remember, he had 27 dancers, and all of them were very, very unique. He had his backup singers, 3 of them. They sounded very raw. There was no hiding. There was no underestimating the vocal texture of every backup singer. And he made sure that if you weren't doing something well, you would practice and practice and practice. One good thing about Fela that I admire so much was his nature to practice. Even when he felt he was doing well, he still believed he needed to go and practice and do so much more. And that's something that I have taken into consideration to keep firing on with your practice. Daily practice, 10 minutes a day, is good for every singer. There's just this one singer in particular that I know that if him and Fela had worked on something together, I always imagine it in my head. I'm like, Bob Marley. Bob Marley should have just worked on something with Fela before he passed. And they should have just found a way, because they were touring and they were going to different countries. It was not just about them anymore. Their song was bigger than them. Their song was everything. So I felt like, why didn't their paths cross? Why didn't they just figure out a way to do something? I wanted to hear it. Or let a DJ do something, just you guys should just put out something, mash up their sound. I want to hear what it would sound like. I really do believe that their sound was just epic. Music-wise, who would you want to have seen? Fela and Bob Marley. Don't tell me nothing. Do like, comment, subscribe, put us out there. And I hope you get to enjoy this as much as I did filming it and talking about them.